Okay, so for this deep dive, we're going to be looking at cheating.
All right.
But to get started, I want to paint a picture.
Okay.
Imagine Europe, 1971. You've got this really stylish Pan Am pilot with his personally selected crew of glamorous flight attendants.
Yeah.
They're hitting all the hot spots: London, Paris, Madrid, Rome.
Nice.
Everyone's looking at me, and it's like peak golden age of air travel.
Oh.
But here's the thing. This was all completely fake.
Right.
The pilot was actually a 23-year-old guy named Frank Abagnale Jr.
Oh, wow.
And get this,
Huh.
he basically just recruited some college students from Arizona
Really?
to pretend to be flight attendants.
Ah.
None of them actually worked for Pan Am.
Wow.
And this wasn't just a quick joke or something. This was a full-on 2-month European adventure, all expenses paid.
Oh, my God.
And Abagnale apparently pocketed $300,000 from it.
That's incredible.
So I think is really interesting is what this whole story tells us about all the little deceptions we see every day.
Yeah. I think what really gets me is just how bold it was. I mean, to pull something like that off on that scale and so publicly, it takes a lot of confidence.
Totally.
And a real knack for taking advantage of systems and the trust we have in them.
For sure. And that whole European thing was really just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, really?
According to Abagnale himself, I mean, this guy was like a master of deception.
Wow.
He claims to have ripped off banks all over the place, stayed in fancy hotels without paying,
No way.
outsmarted airlines past a tripping. I don't even know how many bad checks ran fake colleges.
He did all that.
Yeah, and all while making the police look completely clueless.
Oh, my gosh.
And get this, he says he did all of this before he turned 21,
Wow.
and that he made over $2 million.
That's insane.
Later on, he even pretended to be a Pan Am co-pilot, a pediatrician,
Yeah.
a lawyer, a university professor.
Seriously?
Oh, and he escaped from custody a bunch of times, too.
You're kidding?
It's crazy, right?
It really is like something out of a movie.
It is so... I think what's really cool about Abagnale's story is that it gives us a way to think about the whole idea of cheating in humans.
I see what you mean.
Like, it forces us to ask these big questions.
Yeah.
Like, why do people do it?
That's a good one.
How do they actually pull off these crazy schemes?
Right.
And who are they targeting?
Excellent.
So it's not just about being shocked by one guy's cons.
Yeah.
It's about understanding something really fundamental about human nature.
I like that.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to do in this deep dive today.
Okay. Well,
It's not just about being entertained by Abagnale's stories. We want to figure out how people actually pull off these bold acts of cheating.
interesting.
So the chapter we're looking at brings up 3 really big questions.
Right.
What motivates cheating? What are the techniques involved?
Mm-hmm.
And who gets targeted?
Okay.
By looking at these, we're hoping to uncover some patterns and maybe even touch on the biological roots of cheating.
So it's almost like cheating is this basic part of who we are.
In a way, yeah, but what makes human cheating so fascinating is that it's different from what we see in the animal world.
Right.
I mean, animals use deception too.
Yeah.
Think about camouflage or mimicry.
Sure.
But what humans do is on a whole other level.
I see what you mean.
Like the scale,
Yeah.
the variety of methods, the complexity, the constant innovation. It's mind-blowing.
It really is. And I think a lot of that has to do with our ability to use language,
For sure.
our intelligence in these crazy, complicated societies we've built.
Because that's...
I mean, language lets us create these really nuanced lies and stories. Intelligence helps us come up with elaborate plans.
Right.
And the complexity of our systems gives us so many opportunities to take advantage of things.
Okay, so let's get into that first question.
Yeah.
Why do people cheat?
Right.
Now, if we think about it from a biological perspective, it seems like it comes down to getting resources that you need to survive and reproduce.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's all about that drive for what we call Darwinian fitness.
Exactly. And that basic biological drive is still really powerful.
Yeah.
But with human cheating, it's not that simple.
Right. Humans have this extra layer of complexity that you don't see in animals.
I agree.
I mean, we're still driven by those basic instincts, but our brains are so much more advanced.
Yeah.
And our social structures are so intricate that these drives can show up in ways that are totally unexpected.
So when we look at Abagnale, the answer to that why question seems pretty straightforward at first. It's all about money, right?
Yeah, I mean, forging and cashing $2.5 million in checks back in the 1960s when he wasn't even old enough to vote.
Crazy.
That's an insane amount of money, especially for that time.
It really is, to put it into perspective, that $2.5 million back then would be worth way more today.
Absolutely.
He was making more money through deception than most adults at the time.
And he wasn't even legally an adult himself.
It's wild, but it's not just these huge headline-grabbing cons like Abagnale pulled off.
Right.
Cheating for money can take so many forms. From something small, like scalping tickets,
Yeah,
to really big things like dishonest business practices or embezzling money from companies or those massive Ponzi schemes that can ruin so many people.
exactly. And if you look at different professions, you'll see these more subtle kinds of financial cheating going on.
Like what?
Well, lawyers or consultants might overbill their clients.
Oh, yeah.
Or doctors and dentists might recommend treatments that people don't really need. And then you have things like tax evasion, which a lot of people do.
Right.
But at the core, it's all about getting or holding on to money.
And then there's cheating for things that aren't actually money, but can lead to financial advantages later on.
That's interesting.
Think about status, a good reputation, impressive credentials, and career opportunities. Like that whole college admission scandal a while back. It's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Parents were doing crazy things, forging test scores, making up extracurricular activities.
Wow.
Even bribing officials to get their kids into those top schools.
That's intense.
All that their kids would have a better chance of success in the future, both financially and socially.
And it's really common, too. I mean, the statistic is that 68% of college students admit to cheating at least once during college.
That's a lot.
It shows you how much pressure there is to succeed academically.
Yeah.
And how important people think it is for their future.
And it's not just about getting into college.
Right.
It's about staying ahead once you're there.
True.
The fact that students are more likely to lie about a family member dying right before a big exam.
No way.
Yeah. And that this is actually linked to lower grades overall. It seems like they're trying to get an unfair advantage, even if it's kind of a desperate move.
I guess so.
And then we have all those little everyday lies that we all might be tempted to tell.
Like what?
Exaggerating what we've done at work, taking credit for someone else's idea.
Oh, yeah.
Sucking up to the boss. These might seem minor, but they're all about getting ahead socially.
Right.
Which, as you said, can eventually lead to better pay or promotions.
It's like Billy Joel said, everyone is so untrue.
He's got a point.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that these little lies, even though they seem harmless, can actually hurt trust in the long run.
Absolutely.
Like a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Like with Abagnale, his early experiences show how starting with small lies for one reason can lead to bigger deceptions for other things.
Makes sense.
Which brings us to another big motivator, sex.
Yes.
Abagnale even admitted that some of his first scams were just to get money for dates.
Really?
He started small, but it quickly escalated.
Wow.
And this link between cheating for money and wanting romantic or sexual relationships is important.
I agree.
It's a powerful motivator.
Definitely. And the world of dating, especially online dating, is full of these little deceptions.
It's true. It's almost expected that people will stretch the truth a bit in their profiles.
Right.
Like men might say they're taller or richer than they are, and women might say they weigh less. The average is like 15 pounds, I think.
It's almost like there's this unspoken rule that everyone presents an idealized version of themselves.
Yeah, especially online where first impressions are so important.
And because it's online, people might feel like there's less risk in lying.
Right. It's not face-to-face. And then, of course, there's the big one, marital infidelity.
The classic.
I mean, the fact that we use the word cheat to mean sex cheat shows how important this is to us.
That's a good point. And the statistics on affairs are pretty significant.
They are something like 1.5% to 5% of people cheat every year.
Wow.
And over a lifetime, it could be as high as 25% of men and 15% of women.
That's a lot of people. And to be honest, those numbers are probably even higher.
You think so?
Yeah, it's a sensitive topic and people might not be honest about it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's even become a business hair. Think about Ashley Madison.
Oh, yeah.
With that slogan, life is short, have an affair.
Oh.
It's a whole business model based on helping people cheat.
And then remember that data breach they had?
Oh, yeah.
It turned out that most of the users were men, and a lot of the female profiles were fake, created by bots.
It was like the cheaters were getting cheated on themselves.
Exactly. It's pretty ironic when you think about it, and the fact that there were public figures like Jeff Ashton, Jason Doré, and Josh Duggar.
Wow.
It shows that this is something that can happen in any part of society.
So what makes people cheat in relationships? Is there something biological going on?
Possibly.
Could it be genetic or maybe even religious beliefs?
It's probably a mix of all those things.
I mean, there are hormones like estradiol and progesterone that can affect a woman's desire for sex.
Right.
And maybe make her more likely to look for someone outside her relationship.
And there's research on genes that are linked to infidelity.
Like what?
Well, there are genes for vasopressin and oxytocin receptors.
Okay.
These are important for bonding and attachment.
I see.
And variations in these genes might make someone more likely to cheat.
Interesting. And what about the dopamine D4 receptor gene?
That one's linked to seeking out new and exciting experiences.
So people with certain variations might be more drawn to the thrill of an affair.
Exactly. And then there's that weird relationship between religion and infidelity.
You mean how people who are very religious or not religious at all seem to cheat more?
Yeah, it's like a U-shaped curve.
It shows that our ideas about relationships and sex are really complicated.
They are, but if you look at it from an evolutionary perspective,
Yeah.
the patterns of infidelity make sense.
How so?
For men, it might be about having more kids.
Right.
And for women, it could be about getting more resources or better genes from a different partner.
I see. So even though human relationships are complex, those basic evolutionary pressures are still there.
Exactly. And this brings us to the idea of mate guarding.
Meat guarding.
Yeah, all the things people do to protect their relationship and make sure they have
We
kids.
see that in animals too, right?
Absolutely. But in humans, it can get pretty intense.
Yeah, like divorce or leaving your partner or even violence.
It's true. And men are more likely to use physical force if they think their partner is cheating.
I guess it's tied to that fear of not knowing if a child is really theirs.
And sadly, female infidelity is a common reason for male domestic violence.
That's awful.
It is. And in extreme cases, it can lead to things like rape or honor killings, which are thankfully rare now, but still happen.
It's a reminder of how powerful those primal instincts can be.
For sure. But mate guarding isn't always about reacting to something.
Mm-hmm.
It can also be about trying to prevent it, especially in societies where men control women's sexuality.
Like how?
Well, think about things like making women cover their faces with veils.
Okay.
Or restricting how much they can move around, like
Right.
with foot binding in China.
Oh, yeah, that was brutal.
They went on for centuries.
I know the idea was to make women's feet smaller, supposedly more attractive, but it also kept them from moving around freely.
Exactly. And in Japan, there was this idea of the wife as the inner person who mostly stayed at home.
And even things like female genital mutilation in some African countries.
Right.
They say it's to reduce women's sexual desire. It's all so extreme.
It is, but it shows this desire to control women and make sure men know they're the father of their children.
And even today, we have those weird laws that are rarely enforced
Oh, yeah.
about what women can wear in certain places.
Like what?
I don't know the specifics, but they're these leftover bits of those old mate guarding instincts.
Fascinating. Those are like cultural fossils.
Right. And that Iranian research about how wearing a veil actually makes women seem less sexually appealing.
And that it reduces eye contact?
Yeah, it's like even in modern times, these practices can still have that effect of keeping women away from potential mate poachers, as you call them.
Precisely. So we've talked about why people cheat, what drives them to do it.
Resources in all their forms.
Right now, let's get into how they actually pull it off.
The techniques.
Yeah, and I think Frank Abagnale is a great example.
He was so good at blending into any situation.
It's amazing how well he could observe people and then copy them perfectly.
He was like a chameleon.
Exactly. That ability to socially camouflage himself was key to his success.
Totally. I mean, it allowed him to gain people's trust.
Which is at the heart of so many scams.
For sure. And the chapter talks about these two laws of cheating
Okay.
that seem really important for understanding how deception works.
What are they?
The first law is about abusing the honest parts of communication.
Like lying.
Exactly, giving false information.
Oh, yeah.
And the second law is about taking advantage of weaknesses in people's thinking.
So deceiving them.
Yeah, playing on their biases, their blind spots.
Interesting. And the chapter says that most successful schemes use both of these laws.
Right. And the difference between lying, which is just about whether something is true or not, and deceiving someone, which is about manipulating how they think about something.
Yeah.
That's really important.
It is. And flattery is a great example.
How so?
Well, you're giving someone potentially false information a compliment,
Right.
but you're also taking advantage of our natural tendency to believe good things about ourselves.
So we let our guard down.
Exactly. So how did Abagnale use these two laws?
Well, he definitely took advantage of the trust we have in authority figures like pilots.
That uniform was a huge part of his success.
It was. It made people automatically assume he was legitimate.
It triggered those quick judgments that psychologists call system my thinking.
Yeah. And he also exploited the fact that ID checks for personal checks were pretty lax back then.
So he was really smart about finding weaknesses in both human psychology and the way things worked.
Totally. The uniform gave him an air of authority.
Right.
And the weak ID checks were a systemic flaw that he could take advantage of.
Smart. And he didn't stop there.
Oh, no. He even had professional-looking fake checks printed.
Seriously?
Which plays on our bias to believe something if it looks real.
True.
And he figured out that it took 5 days for bad checks to bounce.
The bounce delay?
Yeah, which gave him time to get the money and disappear.
Sneaky. And what did he do when he was about to get caught?
He would tell some even crazier lie.
Like what?
Like that his European tour was completely legit.
Oh, wow.
Or he'd pretend to be an FBI agent.
Who would question that?
Exactly. Those diversions were brilliant uses of both laws.
I agree. Like with the European tour,
Yeah.
It was so over the top that people probably thought it couldn't be fake.
We tend to not suspect things that are that bold.
True. And pretending to be an FBI agent played on people's fear of authority.
And shut down any questions, right?
Exactly. And let's not forget some of his simpler tricks.
Oh!
Like trying to look older.
Yeah, and adding years to his fake IDs.
It made his impersonations more believable.
Definitely. And he even did his research. He called it homework. He'd learned just enough about a job to sound convincing.
Like a pilot or a pediatrician.
Yeah, or even a sociology professor.
Just enough to fool people.
And his own description of how he cheated is perfect.
What was it?
He said it was a combination of personality, observation, and research.
That covers it all.
It does personality for his charm and confidence,
Right.
observation for spotting weaknesses, and research to play the part.
It's like a cheat sheet for con artists.
It is, but the key is that observation and research part.
That's how you stay ahead.
Exactly. It's a constant cat and mouse game.
And Abagnale was a master at finding those cracks in the system.
Exploiting the loopholes.
The second law in action.
Now, if we think about more complex scams like Ponzi schemes,
Okay.
they use these same laws, but on a much bigger scale.
Right.
The promise of huge returns with little risk is really tempting.
It is. It plays on our desire to get rich quick.
And the way these schemes work is often so complicated,
That it's hard to see the deception.
even for people who are good with money,
Yeah, like Bernie Madoff's scheme. That was a classic example.
where complexity hides the fraud.
Exactly. And the housing bubble in the 2000s is another good example.
That one hit a lot of people.
It did. You had these usually cautious investors getting caught up in the hype.
The belief that housing prices would just keep going up.
Right. A classic cognitive bias.
And that belief created this vulnerability that people in the financial system took advantage of,
Totally. Banks wanted to give out more loans, so they lowered their standards.
making it easy for people with bad credit to get mortgages,
And investment firms created these super complicated financial products.
like CDOs.
Yeah, bundles of mortgages that they sold as safe investments.
And the credit rating agencies were supposed to assess the risk,
Right.
but they often gave these risky products good ratings.
Without really checking how good the loans were.
And then within all of this, you had all sorts of smaller scams popping up.
Oh, yeah.
The so-called real estate gurus.
Promising people they could get rich quick.
Right. And complex financial products being sold to people who didn't understand them.
Including big institutions like pension funds.
It was all built on this foundation of toxic assets,
That no one really understood.
which led to the collapse of Lehman Brothers.
It all came crashing down.
And what's really frustrating is that almost no one on Wall Street was punished.
That's true. It makes you think.
It does, because it shows that when there's no real cost to cheating,
Yeah.
it becomes much more appealing.
Especially for companies.
Exactly. And the lack of accountability in the financial world definitely played a role in the housing crisis.
I agree. So we've seen these principles of cheating in Abagnale's story, but they're still relevant today, especially in the digital world.
The internet is like a new frontier for scammers
It is, and they use novelty to their advantage.
because our brains haven't evolved to keep up.
Right. It's like our Stone Age minds trying to fight modern cyber warfare.
Exactly. The speed and scale of online scams are incredible.
They are, and they're always coming up with new tricks.
So we've looked at what motivates cheaters and how they do it.
Right now, who are their targets?
With his check fraud, Abagnale went after a specific type of person.
Who is that?
He targeted people he thought looked naive,
Okay.
especially young female bank tellers.
Interesting.
He figured they'd be more likely to believe him.
Because of his charm and his seeming respectability.
Exactly. He even said, it's not how good a check looks, but how good the person behind the check looks.
That's pretty insightful.
He was good at finding the easiest targets.
Which is a common strategy for deception.
For sure. And then you have scams like the Nigerian prince email.
Oh, yeah. Those are so obvious.
I know, but that's part of the plan.
Really?
It's a way to filter out people who are more likely to fall for it.
So the people who aren't skeptical enough to see it's a scam.
Exactly. And unfortunately, this often means older people who might not be thinking as clearly.
That's sad. And the chapter talks about two types of cheating.
Okay.
Individual cheating, where you target a person for your own gain.
Right.
And institutional cheating, where you target the rules and systems themselves.
And individual cheating is something we see in animals too.
It is, but institutional cheating seems to be uniquely human.
I guess it makes sense. We're the only ones with these complex systems to exploit.
Right. Businesses, schools, NGOs, governments.
And the chapter makes a good point.
What's that?
We might feel less sympathy when a big institution is cheated.
Than when it's a person.
Exactly, like if Bank of America loses money. It doesn't feel as bad as if someone's life savings are stolen.
And sometimes the person cheating might even feel justified.
Like they're Robin Hood.
Taking from the rich.
And there's so many examples of institutional cheating.
Like what?
Well, doping in sports is a big one.
Athletes breaking the rules.
Yeah. Using technology to cheat and get ahead.
And they often get away with it for a long time.
And make a lot of money before they're caught.
It shows how strong the desire to win is.
And how tempting it can be when the stakes are so high.
Definitely. And then there's free riding.
Which happens in almost every workplace.
It's so easy to get away with when you're part of a team.
Right. You don't do your share of the work.
But you still get the reward.
Exactly. It might seem small, but it can really hurt a team.
It creates resentment and lowers morale.
And I'm sure we've all seen it happen.
Probably. But sometimes free riding can have much bigger consequences.
Like with Bo Bergdahl.
The soldier who deserted in Afghanistan.
He put his fellow soldiers at risk.
And his capture by the Taliban caused a huge controversy.
It shows how important loyalty and commitment are in the military.
Absolutely. And it's not just individuals.
Right. Whole organizations can cheat too.
Like Volkswagen.
With their emissions scandal.
They used software to cheat on tests.
It cost them a fortune.
It did, but it raises questions about the ethics of big corporations.
Like, were they just focused on making money?
And did they feel pressure to meet their targets?
Maybe. And within big organizations, it can be hard to hold people accountable.
Because responsibility is spread out.
So people might feel like their actions don't really matter.
And that can lead to bad decisions. And then there's Wells Fargo.
Where they created millions of fake accounts.
To boost their numbers.
Yeah, and even though the CEO had to resign.
And they paid huge fines.
It still feels like the people at the top don't always face consequences.
It's true. It makes you wonder what would happen if CEOs were held personally responsible.
Would that change how corporations behave?
It's a big question, and it's about corporate accountability.
And this idea of institutional free riding can even happen on a national scale.
Like with the Greek debt crisis.
They borrowed too much and spent too much.
And it created a huge problem.
It was almost like a national Ponzi scheme.
In a way it was, and the chapter really focuses on bureaucracy.
As a breeding ground for free riding.
Yeah, it uses American colleges as an example.
With their huge increase in administrators.
Compared to faculty and students.
It's like an army of bureaucrats.
With all these fancy titles.
And David Graeber talks about managerialism.
Where the focus shifts to things like strategic planning and audits.
Instead of actually teaching and learning.
Right, it's like the administration becomes its own thing.
But the chapter also says that bureaucracy isn't always bad.
True. Max Weber saw it as a way to create order and efficiency.
With its hierarchy-written rules, specialized departments, formal training, and clear duties.
He thought it would make things more precise and fair.
And reduce favoritism.
But in reality, it doesn't always work out that way.
Because bureaucracies are run by people.
And people have their own interests.
So every part of Weber's ideal bureaucracy can be twisted.
Like the hierarchy.
People might start prioritizing their bosses.
And work expands to fill the time available.
Parkinson's law.
Right. And written rules can become so complex that they create loopholes.
Instead of providing clarity.
And departments might focus on protecting their own power.
Instead of working together.
Leading to inefficiency, and even professionalism can be undermined.
By personal relationships and a lack of accountability.
Exactly. And then there's the Peter principle.
People rising to their level of incompetence.
So the human element messes things up.
And creates opportunities for free riding.
That Weber didn't anticipate.
And the chapter gives examples of how this plays out.
Like what?
Well, the SEC sometimes focuses on easy cases.
Instead of the big complex ones.
And schools might exclude low-performing students from tests.
To make their scores look better.
And there are political loopholes that allow unqualified people to get important jobs.
Something Michael Lewis wrote about in The Fifth Risk.
And then there's patronage and favoritism,
which goes against the idea of a meritocracy.
So we see how the good intentions of bureaucracy can be corrupted.
And used for personal gain, and the chapter compares Weber's optimistic view
to Franz Kafka's more pessimistic one.
Kafka saw bureaucracy as inefficient, incompetent, even cruel.
With people trapped in an iron cage.
It's like two sides of the same coin.
Weber the theorist and Kafka the observer.
And that story about the Grand Coulee Dam,
where a simple installation was delayed forever because of bureaucracy.
That's a perfect example of how things can go wrong.
So the chapter challenges the idea that privatization is the solution.
By pointing out that administrative bloat happens in private institutions, too.
Like colleges and the U.S. healthcare system.
Which has huge administrative costs.
Way more than countries with socialized healthcare.
And it brings up David Graeber's idea of bullshit jobs.
And studies that show some jobs actually have a negative impact on society.
Well, privatization doesn't always lead to efficiency.
And the profit motive can make things worse.
By encouraging companies to cut corners and prioritize money above all else.
Creating a more Kafkaesque than Weberian environment.
Right, so what about the idea that government is the problem?
Well, the chapter argues that the U.S. federal government isn't actually that big.
Compared to other countries?
Or even historically.
So size might not be the issue.
Exactly. They say it's the structure that's the problem.
Too complex and too many layers.
Like the comparison between the Kennedy and Trump administrations.
The number of layers increased significantly.
And this complexity leads to problems during crises.
Like Hurricane Katrina and Maria.
And the COVID-19 pandemic.
Where the government couldn't provide basic equipment or enforce mask wearing.
It's like they were understaffed, but also bogged down by rules and politics.
Fareed Zakaria said that government agencies often have too much to do.
But not enough power to do it effectively.
So this complexity creates a perfect environment for free riding.
Even among people who want to do the right thing.
They get caught up in the system.
So instead of cutting budgets,
the chapter suggests simplifying the structure.
Flattening the hierarchy.
And making things less complex.
So to wrap up this deep dive, we've really explored the world of human cheating.
We've looked at the motivations behind it.
The techniques used.
And it gets targeted.
And we've seen that while the reasons for cheating might be universal,
the ways in which we do it are uniquely human.
And closely tied to the complex societies we've created.
We've also talked about the difference between individual cheating
and institutional cheating.
Especially within bureaucracies.
So here's a final thought for you.
Okay.
We've talked about what bureaucratic free riding is and how it works.
Yeah.
But the question of how to fix it is still a big one.